The wind screamed across the ridge at 40 miles per hour, carrying sand that felt like ground glass against exposed skin. Corporal Mika Tanaka pressed her cheek against the stock of her M2010, feeling the weapon shift slightly in the gust, and made a calculation that should have been impossible. 3,050 meters. 9 targets. 90 seconds. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady despite everything, despite the voice in her head that sounded exactly like Chief Petty Officer Wade Harrington telling her that a doll could not fight. 15 days earlier, the Chinook had deposited her at Forward Operating Base Dwyer in Helmand Province with all the ceremony of a supply drop. Mika had grabbed her ruck, which weighed nearly as much as she did, and felt her spine compress the moment the straps settled on her shoulders. Mika had deployed twice before, but never to a forward operating base this close to active engagement zones, and never to work with Navy SEALs who had reputations that preceded them like weather systems. Sergeant Jackson Rivers found her near the transient tent, struggling to hoist her ruck onto the bunk. He was tall and solid, with dark skin and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which he did often despite being in a place where smiles felt like minor acts of rebellion against reality. He lifted her ruck like it was empty and set it on the bunk with one hand. "Thanks," Mika said. Rivers extended his other hand. "Jackson Rivers. I am your spotter, apparently." "Apparently," Mika echoed, shaking his hand. She had small hands, delicate even, and they disappeared in his grip. "Mika Tanaka. I know who you are," Rivers said. "You are the one who shot expert at 900 meters with a cold bore in Aberdeen. First round on target in a 20-knot crosswind." Mika felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You heard about that. Everyone heard about that." Rivers grinned. "Also heard you were 4'0" and probably made of spare parts from a toy factory, but I figure half of what I hear is garbage, so I will make my own assessments." 4'9", Mika corrected. "And I am made of the same thing you are. Just less of it." Rivers laughed, a genuine sound that made Mika decide she liked him. "Good answer. Come on, I will show you where the good chow hall is." Well, the less terrible chow hall. They walked across the compound, boots crunching on gravel that had been baked by the sun until it felt like ceramic. Mika noticed the looks. She always noticed the looks. Soldiers glanced at her, did double takes, muttered to their buddies. Some looked amused. Some looked concerned. A few looked openly hostile, like her presence was a personal insult to their profession. Near the operations center, a group of men stood in a loose circle, and Mika recognized the vibe immediately. SEALs. They had a particular way of carrying themselves, a casual confidence that bordered on arrogance, but was backed by enough skill that it never quite crossed the line. They were all tall, all broad, all exactly what central casting would send if you ordered operators. The man in the center stood maybe 6'2", with shoulders like a linebacker and a jaw that looked carved from granite. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless in the harsh sunlight, and they tracked Mika with the focus of a predator assessing prey. Chief Petty Officer Wade Harrington. She had seen his file, knew his reputation. 20 missions deep into bad country, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 with a V device for valor. He was a legend, and he looked like he knew it. "Rivers," one of the SEALs called out. "This the sniper you've been talking up?" "That is her," Rivers said, and there was pride in his voice that Mika had not earned yet. "Corporal Tanaka." Wade stepped forward, looking down at Mika from what felt like a great height. His expression was not hostile exactly. It was worse. It was dismissive, the look someone gave a child who had wandered into the wrong room. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her height, her frame, the way her uniform hung on her despite being the smallest size the Army issued. "You were kidding," Wade said finally. His voice was deep, textured with a Texas drawl that made every word sound like judgment. "This is a joke, right? Some kind of morale thing?" Mika felt her jaw tighten. "No joke, Chief. I'm assigned to provide overwatch for joint operations." Wade looked at Rivers. "You're seriously telling me this is our sniper?" "This. Best shot I have ever worked with," Rivers said, and his voice had gone flat and hard. "Bar none." Wade shook his head slowly, like he was watching something sad happen. He turned back to Mika, and when he spoke, his voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Look, no disrespect, but a doll cannot fight. This is not a rifle range back in the world. This is Hellman Province. The real thing. People die out here when the chain breaks. And you, Mika felt the condescension in how he used her first name. You're not built for this. With respect, Chief, Mika said, keeping her voice level even though her pulse was hammering, I qualified expert on every weapon system I've been trained on. I have 2 deployments under my belt. I know what the real thing looks like. Wade glanced at the other SEALs, and a few of them smirked. 2 deployments to where? Germany? Kuwait? You ever take contact? You ever have to haul a wounded operator through 200 meters of open ground while taking fire from 3 sides? No, Mika admitted. Then you do not know what the real thing looks like. Wade stepped closer, looming over her. Out here, you need to be able to shoot, move, and communicate. You need to carry your own weight, literally. You need to be able to drag a wounded teammate to safety. Tell me, Corporal, how much does your ruck weigh? 80 pounds. And how much do you weigh? 98 pounds. Wade let that hang in the air for a moment. You are carrying 80% of your body weight on your back. You think it is sustainable? You think when things go bad, you're going to be able to perform? I know I will, Mika said. You know, Wade repeated, and he shook his head again. Confidence is good. Delusion gets people killed. He turned to Rivers. I'm going to recommend to Captain Vasquez that we get a real sniper for this deployment. No offense to your friend here, but this is not a training exercise. Before Mika could respond, Wade walked away, his team following. One of them clapped Rivers on the shoulder in what might have been sympathy. Rivers waited until they were out of earshot, then looked down at Mika. You okay? Fine, Mika said. Her hand was shaking slightly, so she balled them into fists. I have heard worse. That was not okay, Rivers said. Wade is a good operator, one of the best, but he's got a blind spot about women in combat. Lost his best friend a few years back. There was a female soldier involved, and he blames her. It is not rational, but trauma rarely is. Great, Mika said. So I'm paying for someone else's mistakes. You're not paying for anything. You are here because you earned it. Rivers started walking again, and Mika followed. By the way, where are you watching from? Maybe you have seen situations like this where you are from, where people doubt you before they even give you a chance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of in-processing, weapons checks, and briefings. Mika met Captain Elena Vasquez, a sharp-eyed Latina woman who commanded the company with quiet authority and seemed unimpressed by SEAL opinions. She met Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her platoon leader, who looked young and uncertain and said all the right things while his eyes betrayed his doubts. That evening, Mika found herself on the range, going through her pre-mission routine with her rifle. The M2010 was a beautiful weapon, precision-engineered and deadly at distances that seemed impossible to civilians. In Mika's hands, it felt like an extension of her own nervous system. She had fired so many rounds through rifles like this one that she could tell you the exact pressure her trigger broke at, could compensate for a worn barrel, could red wind better than most people read facial expressions. Rivers spotted for her while she took practice shots at various distances. 300 meters, 500, 800. Every round found center mass. She was not showing off. She was proving, the way she had been proving herself since the first time she picked up a rifle and discovered the only place in the world where her size did not matter. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, when Mika heard voices from behind the HESCO barriers near the operations center. She recognized Wade's voice immediately. I am telling you, Elena, Wade was saying, she's a liability. I do not care how well she shoots on a square range. This is not about marksmanship. This is about survival. My team's and hers. Captain Vasquez's voice was calm but firm. Chief, I appreciate your concern, but Corporal Tanaka is one of the best snipers the Army has produced in the last 5 years. She has earned this deployment. She has earned nothing. Wade shot back. She won a genetic lottery that made her small and cute, and the Army is bending over backward to prove they are progressive. Meanwhile, real operators are going to have to compensate for her limitations, and that is going to get someone killed. Mika felt something cold settle in her chest. She stood frozen behind the barrier, Rivers beside her, both of them listening to Wade make his case for why she should not be here. I am filing a formal recommendation that she be removed from the deployment roster, Wade said. For her safety and ours. Noted, Vasquez said. Recommendation denied. She deploys. Then whatever happens is on you, Wade said. Mika heard footsteps moving away. She stayed where she was, staring at her rifle, feeling the weight of Wade's words settle over her like the dust that coated everything in this place. Rivers put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, he said softly. Do not let him get in your head. Too late, Mika thought, but she did not say it. Instead, she nodded, checked her rifle one more time, and walked back toward her tent, wondering if Wade was right, wondering if she was a liability, wondering if proving herself was going to cost more than she was willing to pay. Sleep did not come easily that night. Mika lay on her cot in the transient tent, listening to the generator's hum and the occasional crack of distant gunfire that sounded almost casual, like someone clearing their throat. The tent smelled like sweat and gun oil and the particular staleness that came from too many bodies in too small a space. She stared at the canvas ceiling and replayed Wade's words on an endless loop. A doll cannot fight. A liability. Go to get someone killed. The doubt crept in a way it always did, quiet and insidious, finding the cracks in her confidence and prying them wider. What if he was right? What if her entire career was built on instructors being too polite to tell her the truth, on a military desperate to prove it valued diversity over capability? What if she really was just small and cute and the Army's diversity poster child? She reached for the photograph she kept in the pocket of her assault pack. The edges were worn soft from handling. Her grandfather, Takeshi Tanaka, stood in his uniform from 1944, holding his Springfield rifle with casual confidence. He had been a sniper in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the most decorated unit in American military history, a unit composed entirely of Japanese Americans fighting to prove their loyalty while their families sat in internment camps. He had been 5 feet 4 inches tall, compact and precise, and he had survived the war with 73 confirmed kills and a Bronze Star he never talked about. When Mika was 8 years old, he had taken her to a rifle range in Northern California. The other shooters had smiled indulgently at the tiny girl with pigtails holding a .22 rifle that was almost as tall as she was. Then she had fired, and the smiles had disappeared. Her grandfather had taught her to feel the wind, not just calculate it. He had taught her that being small meant being underestimated, and being underestimated was an advantage if you were smart enough to use it. You were built like a sniper, he had told her when she was 12, when she was already resigning herself to being the smallest person in every room. Small target, low center of gravity, steady hands. Your size is not a weakness, Mika. It is a weapon. You just have to learn how to use it. She had joined the Army at 18 to honor him, to prove that his lessons mattered, to carry forward a legacy that felt sacred. And now a SEAL chief from Texas who had never seen her shoot was telling her she did not belong. Mika put the photograph back and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. Morning arrived with the reveille that echoed across the compound at 0500. Mika dressed quickly, her body protesting the movements with the deep ache that lived in her lower back. The pain was her constant companion, the price of carrying equipment designed for someone else's body. The rucksack straps dug into her shoulders in the wrong places. The body armor sat too low on her torso. The helmet was too large and shifted when she moved her head. Every piece of gear was a reminder that the military had not been built with her in mind. She dry swallowed 2 ibuprofen and headed to the chow hall. Rivers found her there, sitting alone with a tray of powdered eggs and something that might have been bacon in a previous life. He dropped into the seat across from her with his own tray, piled high with enough calories to fuel a small vehicle. You look tired, he said. Could not sleep. What got in your head? Mika shrugged. Maybe he has a point. Rivers set down his fork and looked at her with an intensity that made her meet his eyes. Listen to me. I have worked with 8 different snipers in my career. Some were good. Some were great. You are exceptional. You know how I know? Because when you shoot, you do not just hit the target. You hit exactly where you intend to hit. Center mass, headshot, peripheral hit to wound instead of kill. I have seen you place rounds with surgical precision. That is not luck. That is not the Army being nice. That is skill. Wade does not think so. Wade thinks women should not be in combat roles because he watched one fail under pressure. He is taking a sample size of one and applying it to half the human race. That is not logic. That is trauma. Rivers leaned forward. You know what I think? I think Wade is scared. Of me? Of being wrong. Of having his entire worldview challenged by someone who is 4'9" and weighs less than his ruck. Rivers smiled. Nothing scares a man like having to admit he was wrong about something he has built his identity around. Before Mika could respond, Captain Vasquez appeared at their table. She was carrying a tablet and wore the expression of someone who had already dealt with 3 problems before breakfast. "Corporal Tanaka," she said, "walk with me." Mika followed Vasquez out of the chow hall and across the compound toward the operations center. The sun was already brutal, turning the air into something you had to chew before you could breathe it. "I want you to know that Chief Harrington's recommendation has been noted and filed," Vasquez said without preamble. "It has also been denied. You are deploying with your assigned unit as planned." "Thank you, ma'am." "Do not thank me." Vasquez stopped walking and turned to face Mika. "I'm not doing you a favor. I am assigning personnel based on capability, not on someone's outdated prejudices. But I need you to understand something. Every mission from here on out, you're going to be under a microscope. Every decision you make, every shot you take, every movement you execute, someone will be watching and waiting for you to fail. That is not fair. That is not right. But that is reality. I understand. Do you?" Vasquez's eyes were hard. "Because I had to fight these same battles 20 years ago when I was a lieutenant. I had colonels telling me I was too emotional for command. I had sergeants who refused to take orders from a woman. I had to be twice as good to get half the credit. And you know what I learned? Being twice as good is not enough. You have to be flawless. You have to be undeniable. You have to make it impossible for them to dismiss you." "I will be flawless," Mika said. Vasquez studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Do not make me a liar." Dismissed. The rest of the morning was spent on the range with Rivers, running drills that pushed Mika's capabilities. They started at 600 meters, then 800, then pushed out to 1,000. The wind was gusting unpredictably, the kind of conditions that made shooting feel more like prayer than science. Mika compensated for each gust, feeling the air pressure change against her skin, reading the mirage through her scope, making calculations that were part mathematics and part instinct. She fired. The round took 3 seconds to reach the target. 3 seconds of wondering if she had read the wind correctly, if her elevation was right, if this would be the shot that proved Wade correct. Then the spotter confirmed impact. "Center mass." "Again," Rivers said. She fired again, and again, and again. 12 rounds, 12 hits. Her shoulder ached from the recoil. Her hands were steady. "You're making this look too easy," Rivers said. "You're going to give me a complex." "Just doing my job," Mika said, but she felt something settle in her chest. Confidence, maybe. Or just the certainty that came from repetition, from muscle memory, from knowing that at least in this one thing, she was exactly as good as she needed to be. They were packing up the rifle when Wade appeared at the edge of the range. He stood with his arms crossed, watching. Mika felt his presence like a weight, but she refused to look at him. She broke down the M2010 with practiced efficiency, cleaning each component, checking for wear, reassembling it with the kind of care people usually reserve for religious artifacts. Wade walked closer. His shadow fell across her work. "Not bad," he said finally. Mika looked up. "Thanks, Chief. But range shooting is not the same as combat shooting. You know that, right? Out there, the targets shoot back. The wind does not cooperate. The platform is not stable. Everything you think you know becomes useless." Mika finished securing her rifle case and stood. "With respect, Chief, I know the difference between range conditions and field conditions. I also know that every operator, including you, trains on ranges before deploying. If range shooting is useless, why do we do it?" Wade's jaw tightened. "Do not get smart with me, Corporal. I'm not getting smart. I am asking a legitimate question. The question is not legitimate. It is disrespectful. Wade stepped closer, using his height the way some people use volume. You want to know why I am opposed to you being here? It is not personal. It is practical. 3 years ago, my best friend, my swim buddy, took a round in Afghanistan. Shattered his femur. He needed to be dragged 400 meters to the extraction point while we were taking fire from an elevated position. The soldier assigned to provide security was a woman. She tried. I will give her that. She tried to drag him, but she was not strong enough. She was not big enough. And while she was failing, my friend bled out in the dirt because I was too far away to help. Mika felt her anger drain away, replaced by something colder. I am sorry for your loss, Chief. I do not want your sympathy. I want you to understand that out here, good intentions do not matter. Capability matters. And when you weigh 98 pounds, your capability has limits. So does everyone's, Mika said quietly. You're 6'2", maybe 220. What happens if you need to crawl through a drainage pipe? What happens if you need to hide in a space too small for your frame? What happens if you need someone who can shoot from an unsupported position that your body mass makes unstable? Wade stared at her. That is different. How? Because those are edge cases. What I'm talking about is fundamental capability. Respectfully, Chief, you are talking about one capability. Strength. There are others. Speed, precision, patience. The ability to make a shot you do not believe is possible. Mika picked up her rifle case. I cannot drag a 200-pound man 400 meters. You are right about that. But I can hit a target at 1,500 meters in a crosswind while you are still trying to calculate holdover. We all have limits. The question is whether we let those limits define us or whether we find ways to work around them. She walked away before Wade could respond, her heart hammering, wondering if she had just made things better or infinitely worse. The joint training exercise was announced 3 days later. Army and Navy assets working together on simulated combat scenarios, designed to build interoperability and identify weaknesses before actual operations commenced. Lieutenant Webb delivered the briefing with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list, but Mika understood what it really meant. This was her audition. This was Wade's opportunity to prove she could not handle the pressure. The exercise would take place in a valley 12 kilometers from the base, an area that featured rocky terrain, elevation changes, and enough variables to make it interesting. Teams would rotate through scenarios involving target identification, fire support coordination, and movement under simulated contact. Mika and Rivers would provide overwatch from an elevated position while SEAL elements moved through the valley below. Simple enough, Rivers said as they prepped their gear the night before. We sit on a hill. We spot targets we call corrections. You have done this 100 times. Not with Wade watching my every move, Mika said. So do not give him anything to watch except perfection. The morning of the exercise arrived cold and clear. Mika loaded her ruck with everything she would need for a 12-hour operation. Water, ammunition, medical supplies, observation equipment, energy bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard. The pack weighed 82 pounds when she finished. She hoisted it on her back and felt her spine compress, felt the familiar burning pain spread across her lower back like hot wire. She ignored it. The convoy left the base at 0600, a line of armored vehicles kicking up dust that hung in the air like fog. Mika rode in silence, watching the landscape roll past, mentally preparing for what was coming. Across from her, Wade sat with his team, checking equipment with the casual efficiency of people who had done this so many times it had become muscle memory. He glanced at her once, his expression unreadable, then returned his attention to his rifle. They arrived at the valley as the sun was breaking over the eastern ridge. The terrain was harsh and beautiful, all jagged rocks and steep angles painted in shades of tan and rust. Mika and Rivers were assigned to an observation post on the northern slope, a position that offered clear lines of sight to the valley floor, but required a climb that would test anyone's endurance. Ready? Rivers asked. Always, Mika lied. The climb took 40 minutes. The rocks were loose and treacherous, shifting under her boots. The ruck threatened to pull her backward with every step. Her thighs burned. Her lungs burned. Her back screamed in protest. She focused on breathing, on placing one foot in front of the other, on not giving Wade the satisfaction of seeing her fail before the exercise even started. They reached the observation post, and Mika dropped her ruck with a gasp she tried to disguise as normal breathing. Rivers gave her a look that said he was not fooled, but would not embarrass her by mentioning it. They set up their position quickly, establishing fields of fire, checking ranges to key terrain features, creating a hide that would conceal them from anyone looking up from the valley floor. Mika settled behind her rifle and felt the world narrow to the circle of her scope. This was where she was most comfortable, where size did not matter, where only skill counted. The exercise began. SEAL teams moved through the valley in tactical formations, clearing simulated enemy positions marked by orange panels. Mika tracked them through her scope, calling out distances and adjustments to Rivers, who relayed them through the radio net. 800 meters to the lead element. Wind from the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Temperature 78 degrees and climbing. Contact left, the radio crackled. Simulated enemy position at grid November, Sierra 473. Mika swung her rifle to the coordinates. Found the target. A panel position behind a rock outcropping that offered good cover and concealment. She calculated the shot. 920 meters. Slight upward angle. Wind pushing left to right. I have the shot, Mika said. Send it, Rivers replied. She controlled her breathing. Felt her heartbeat slow. Squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The rifle punched her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the bullet trace through the air and strike dead center on the target panel. Impact, Rivers called. Target neutralized. The exercise continued for hours. Mika engaged target after target, adapting to changing conditions, compensating for wind shifts and temperature variations. Every shot was calculated. Every shot landed. She fell into a rhythm that felt almost meditative, the kind of flow state where thinking disappeared and instinct took over. Then the conditions changed. Wade's voice came over the radio, clipped and professional. Sniper team, be advised we are increasing difficulty. You will now engage targets while we provide simulated suppressive fire. Expect noise and distraction. Copy that, Rivers said, and shot Mika a look. Here we go. The valley erupted in sound. Blank rounds fired from multiple positions, creating a cacophony that made communication difficult. Smoke grenades popped, obscuring visibility. Wade was testing her, seeing if she could maintain performance under stress. Mika blocked out the noise, focused on her scope. A target appeared at 1,100 meters, partially obscured by smoke. She adjusted for the reduced visibility, for the mirage created by the heat, for the wind that was now gusting unpredictably. She fired. The round cut through the smoke and hit center mass. Good shot, Rivers said, but she could barely hear him over the simulated chaos. Another target, 1,200 meters. Moving. She let it slightly, accounting for its speed and direction. Fired. Hit. And another. 1,300 meters. Elevated position. Difficult angle. She compensated for the geometry, for gravity's pull on the bullet over that distance. Fired. Hit. 6 targets in 90 seconds. All hits. All under conditions designed to break her concentration. The smoke cleared. The firing stopped. Silence returned to the valley like something physical. Wade's voice came over the radio again, and this time there was something different in his tone. Something that might have been surprise. Sniper team, confirmed target status. 6 targets engaged, 6 hits, Rivers reported. Clean board. There was a pause. Then Wade said, copy that. Stand by for next scenario. The exercise continued through the afternoon. With each scenario, Wade increased the difficulty. Longer ranges, worse conditions, more distractions. And with each scenario, Mika delivered. By the time the sun was setting, she had engaged 42 targets and landed 42 hits. Perfect score. They broke down their position and made the climb back down to the valley floor. Mika's legs were shaking from exhaustion. Her back was on fire. Her shoulder was bruised from recoil. She felt like she had been beaten with hammers. She also felt satisfied in a way that went beyond physical sensation. Wade was waiting at the bottom of the slope with his team. He watched Mika approach, and for the first time since she had met him, his expression was not dismissive. It was evaluating, like he was seeing her for the first time. "Not bad, Corporal," he said. "Thank you, Chief. But there is something you should know." Wade stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Mika and Rivers could hear. "Someone tampered with your equipment last night. Your rifle scope was loosened. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to throw off your zero." Mika felt her stomach drop. "What?" "I noticed it this morning when I was checking the armory. The mounting screws were backed off a quarter turn." Wade's expression was hard. "I tightened them before you loaded out. Did not mention it because I wanted to see if you would notice the difference. But someone tried to sabotage you." "Who?" Rivers demanded. Wade shook his head. "Could have been anyone with access to the armory. I filed a report, but without evidence, there is not much we can do." He looked at Mika. "I am telling you this because you need to watch your back. Not everyone wants you to succeed." "Why are you helping me?" Mika asked. Wade was quiet for a moment. "Because 42 for 42 under those conditions is not luck. That is skill. And maybe I was wrong about some things." He turned and walked back toward the vehicles, leaving Mika standing in the dust, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had tried to sabotage her. Wade had stopped them. Wade, who 3 days ago had called her a liability, had just admitted he might have been wrong. "You okay?" Rivers asked. "I do not know," Mika said honestly. "I thought today was going to prove I belonged. Instead, I found out someone does not want me here badly enough to sabotage my equipment." "Hey," Rivers put a hand on her shoulder. "You did prove you belonged. 42 shots. 42 hits. That is undeniable. Whoever messed with your scope, they are scared. People do not sabotage people they do not see as threats." Mika wanted to believe that. She wanted to feel victorious. Instead, she felt tired and sore and aware that the real challenges were just beginning. The exercise had proven she could shoot. It had not proven she could survive in a place where someone wanted her to fail badly enough to put her life at risk. She loaded her ruck into the vehicle and climbed in for the ride back to base, her mind already racing through possibilities, trying to figure out who hated her enough to sabotage her equipment, trying to figure out how to protect herself from an enemy she could not see. The investigation into the sabotage went nowhere fast. Captain Vasquez interviewed everyone with armory access, which turned out to be half the base. No one had seen anything. No one knew anything. The security cameras in that section had conveniently malfunctioned the night before the exercise. Mika was not surprised. Whoever had done it was smart enough to cover their tracks. What bothered her more than the sabotage itself was the gnawing uncertainty. She found herself watching everyone differently now, wondering if the soldier who nodded to her at breakfast was the same one who had tried to make her fail. She second-guessed every interaction, saw hostility in neutral expressions, interpreted silence as conspiracy. "You're going to drive yourself crazy," Rivers told her 3 days after the exercise. They were sitting in the chow hall, picking at lunch that tasted like it had been cooked and then forgotten for several years. "Someone tried to sabotage me," Mika said. "How am I supposed to just ignore that?" "You do not ignore it. You just do not let it consume you." Rivers leaned forward. "Listen, whoever did it failed. You shot perfect anyway. That has to be eating them alive. Best revenge is continuing to be excellent. Easy for you to say. No one is trying to undermine you. You think I have not dealt with my share of garbage?" Rivers shook his head. "I am a black man in a predominantly white institution. I have had people assume I was there because of quotas, not capability. I have had NCOs who thought I was not smart enough for technical work. I have had to prove myself over and over. It does not stop. You just get better at dealing with it." "How?" "By refusing to let their doubts become my doubts. By knowing my worth independent of their opinions." Rivers pointed his fork at her. "You are an exceptional sniper. That is a fact. Someone else's inability to accept that fact does not change it." Before Mika could respond, Lieutenant Webb appeared at their table. He looked uncomfortable, which was his default expression, but today it seemed amplified. "Corporal Tanaka," he said, "Captain Vasquez needs to see you in her office." "Now." Mika exchanged a glance with Rivers, then followed Webb across the compound. The operations center was busy with the usual chaos of a forward operating base. Radios chattered. Soldiers moved with purpose. Maps covered every available wall space. Webb led her to Vasquez's office, a cramped room that smelled like coffee and stress. Vasquez was standing behind her desk, arms crossed, expression harder than Mika had seen before. Wade Harrington stood to her right, and even in the small space, his presence felt enormous. This was not going to be good news. "Sit," Vasquez said. Mika sat. Wade remained standing, his face carved from stone. "Chief Harrington has filed a formal complaint," Vasquez said without preamble. "He is recommending that you be removed from the upcoming deployment roster due to safety concerns." Mika felt her stomach clench. "Ma'am, I shot 42 for 42 in the exercise." "I am aware," Vasquez said. "I'm also aware that someone tampered with your equipment beforehand, which raises questions about security and unit cohesion that are frankly above my pay grade to resolve in the time we have. With respect, ma'am, that is not my fault." "No one is saying it is your fault," Wade said. His voice was level, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "What I am saying is that your presence is creating division in the unit. That division creates operational risk. My job is to minimize risk. My job is to provide precision fire support," Mika said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "which I have demonstrated I can do at the highest level." "On a range," Wade said, "under controlled conditions. You still have not proven you can perform in actual combat. Neither has half your team," Mika shot back. "How many of your SEALs are on their first deployment? How many have never taken contact? You are holding me to a standard you do not apply to anyone else." Wade's jaw tightened. "My team has been training together for 18 months. They trust each other. They know each other's capabilities and limitations. You are an unknown variable. Then let me become a known variable. Let me deploy. Let me prove myself where it actually matters." Vasquez held up a hand. "Enough." She looked at Wade. "Chief, I understand your concerns. I do not agree with them, but I understand them. However, Corporal Tanaka has met or exceeded every standard required of her position. She has passed every qualification. She has demonstrated exceptional marksmanship under pressure. Unless you have evidence of actual incapacity, I cannot remove her from the roster based on theoretical concerns." "This is not theoretical," Wade said. "This is about real-world capability in life or death situations. Then we will evaluate her real-world capability when we get to real-world situations," Vasquez said. "Until then, she deploys as assigned." "Dismissed." Wade held Vasquez's gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly and left the office. The door closed behind him with more force than necessary. Mika sat frozen, processing what had just happened. Vasquez moved around her desk and leaned against it, looking down at Mika with an expression that mixed sympathy and frustration. "You need to understand something," Vasquez said. "Wade is not your enemy. He is a good operator who watched his best friend die and is trying to prevent it from happening again. His logic is flawed, his application is prejudiced, but his intent is not malicious." "That does not make it hurt less," Mika said quietly. "No, it does not," Vasquez sighed. "But it does mean that proving him wrong might actually change his mind, whereas proving yourself to someone who just hates you accomplishes nothing. Wade can be reached. You just have to be patient." "How patient?" "As patient as it takes." Vasquez straightened. "You deploy in 6 days. The mission is critical. High-value target, limited window, maximum operational security. You will be providing overwatch for a direct action raid. This is exactly the kind of mission that will either prove Wade right or prove him wrong. No middle ground. No pressure," Mika said, attempting humor that fell flat. "All the pressure," Vasquez corrected. "Welcome to leadership." Dismissed. Mika left the office feeling like she had been in a fight. Her hands were shaking. Her chest felt tight. She found Rivers waiting outside, leaning against a HESCO barrier, and the expression on his face said he already knew. "She deploys," Rivers said. It was not a question. "She deploys," Mika confirmed. And apparently, I have 6 days to prepare for the mission that will define whether I have a career or not. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching on gravel, the sun beating down like a physical weight. Mika felt the enormity of what was coming settle over her. This was not about marksmanship anymore. This was about proving she belonged in a world that had been explicitly designed without her in mind. That evening, Mika found herself on the range again, running drills long after most soldiers had returned to their tents. She fired until her shoulder was numb, until her eyes burned from staring through the scope, until the repetition became meditation. Rivers spotted for her without complaint, calling corrections, encouraging consistency, being the kind of partner that made the impossible feel merely difficult. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of amber and shadow, Wade appeared at the edge of the range. Mika saw him in her peripheral vision, but did not acknowledge him. She focused on her breathing, on the target at 1,400 meters, on the wind that was shifting as the temperature dropped. She fired. The round flew true. Impact. Wade walked closer, his boots loud on the packed earth. He stood there for a long moment, watching before finally speaking. "I'm not trying to ruin your career," he said. "Could have fooled me," Mika replied without looking away from her scope. "I'm trying to keep people alive. There's a difference." "Your friend," Mika said, finally turning to face him. "The one who died. What was his name?" Wade's expression flickered. Something vulnerable crossed his face before the mask returned. "Connor. Connor Matthews. Tell me what happened." Wade was quiet for so long that Mika thought he would not answer. Then he said, "We were extracting after a mission went sideways. Connor took a round that shattered his femur. He could not walk, could not even stand. The designated security, a female specialist, was supposed to help get him to the landing zone while we provided cover. She tried. I will give her that. She tried to drag him, but he weighed 215 pounds with his kit, and she weighed maybe 130. She got him maybe 50 meters before she had to stop. By the time I fought my way back to them, Connor had bled out. Wade's voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant the emotions were too big to show. He died because someone was not physically capable of doing what the situation required. I am sorry that happened, Mika said. I mean that. But one woman's failure does not predict my failure. Just like one man's success does not predict your success. How do I know that? You do not. Mika stood, setting her rifle down carefully. You do not know that about anyone until the moment comes. You could train with someone for years, and they could freeze when it matters. Or you could work with someone new, and they could save your life. The only way to know is to let people try. And if you fail, then I fail. And you get to say you were right. But if I succeed, you have to admit you were wrong. Mika held his gaze. Are you willing to take that bet? Wade looked at her for a long moment. Then, without answering, he turned and walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving Mika standing alone on the range with more questions than answers, and 6 days until everything she had worked for would be tested in ways she could not fully prepare for. The days before deployment blurred together in a haze of preparation and doubt. Mika checked and rechecked her equipment, ran through scenarios in her mind until they played on endless loop, and slept in fractured intervals punctuated by dreams where her shots missed and people died because of it. The pressure felt like a physical weight, crushing down on her chest until breathing became a conscious effort. On the third day, she woke at 0300 with her back screaming in protest. The pain was worse than usual, sharp and radiating, the kind that made movement feel like punishment. She lay in the darkness of the tent, listening to the rhythmic breathing of sleeping soldiers around her, and let herself acknowledge the fear she had been pushing down for weeks. What if Wade was right? What if she was not built for this? What if her body failed her at the critical moment and someone died because she had been too proud to admit her limitations? She dry swallowed 3 ibuprofen and forced herself upright, moving slowly in the dark, every motion calculated to minimize the pain. By the time she dressed and made it to the chow hall, her back had settled into its usual deep ache, manageable if she did not think about it too much. Rivers found her there, sitting alone with untouched food growing cold on her tray. He slid into the seat across from her and studied her face with the kind of attention that made lying pointless. "You look like you have not slept in days," he said. "I have slept," Mika said. "Just not well." "The mission?" "Everything." Mika pushed her tray away. "Rivers, what if I am not good enough? What if all of this, all the training and qualifying and proving myself, what if it does not matter when things go bad?" Rivers leaned back and crossed his arms. "You want me to lie to you or tell you the truth?" "Truth. The truth is I do not know if you're good enough. Nobody knows until the moment happens. Wade does not know. Vasquez does not know. I do not know." Rivers leaned forward again. "But here's what I do know. I have worked with 8 snipers before you. Good ones. Guys who could shoot, who had all the physical advantages, who checked every box Wade thinks matters. And you know what? 2 of them froze when it counted. One of them had a perfect shot on a high-value target and could not pull the trigger because suddenly it was a real human being in his scope instead of a paper target. Another one panicked during a firefight and nearly shot friendly forces." Mika met his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that physical capability does not predict mental fortitude. Being big and strong does not make you brave. Being small does not make you weak." Rivers tapped the table for emphasis. "What makes you good is not your size. It is your mind, your discipline, your refusal to quit even when everything hurts and everyone doubts you. That is what I am betting on. And if you are wrong, then we both fail together." Rivers smiled. "But I do not think I am wrong." The conversation helped, but it did not eliminate the doubt. Doubt was a constant companion now, whispering in her ear during every quiet moment, turning every minor pain into evidence of inadequacy, every glance from another soldier into confirmation that she did not belong. 2 days before deployment, Captain Vasquez called her in again. This time, Wade was not there. It was just Vasquez, looking tired in a way that suggested she was carrying weight Mika could not see. "Sit," Vasquez said, and Mika sat. "How are you holding up?" "Fine, me." Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Try again." Mika hesitated, then said, "Honestly, I am terrified. Terrified I will fail. Terrified I will prove Wade right. Terrified that everything I have worked for will come down to one moment, and I will not be enough." "Good," Vasquez said. Mika blinked. "Good? Fear means you understand stakes. Fear means you are taking this seriously." Vasquez opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "Let me tell you a story. 20 years ago, I was a second lieutenant in charge of a convoy in Iraq. We took contact. IED followed by small arms fire. My platoon sergeant was hit. My driver was hit. I had soldiers bleeding in 3 different vehicles and insurgents shooting from multiple positions. I was 23 years old, and I was absolutely convinced I was going to get everyone killed. What did you do? I did my job. I called for air support. I organized casualty evacuation. I led a counter-assault that drove off the attackers. And when it was over and everyone who could be saved was saved, I went back to my quarters and vomited from the stress." Vasquez closed the folder. "Being afraid does not mean you will fail. It means you are human. The question is what you do with that fear. How do I know I will do the right thing? You do not." Vasquez stood and walked to the window that looked out over the compound. "But I have watched you for weeks now. I have seen you face dismissal, sabotage, and institutional bias, and you have not quit. You have not complained. You have not lowered your standards. That tells me something about your character. Wade sees your size. I see your spine." Mika felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you, ma'am. Do not thank me yet. The mission brief is tomorrow." Vasquez turned back from the window. "The target is a Taliban commander responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces. The compound is heavily defended. The approach is difficult. The extraction will be under fire. This is not a training exercise. This is the real thing. And yes, everyone will be watching you. But they will also be depending on you. Do not let them down." "I will not," Mika said, hoping it was true. That night, she could not sleep at all. She lay in her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What if the wind was too strong? What if visibility was poor? What if she had to take a shot at maximum range with no time to calculate? What if Wade was right and her body failed her when it mattered most? At 0400, She gave up on sleep and went to the range. The base was quiet, most soldiers still asleep, the only sounds the hum of generators and the distant bark of guard dogs. She set up her rifle in the darkness, settling into position by feel, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. She did not fire. She just lay there, feeling the weight of the rifle, the texture of the stock against her cheek, the gentle resistance of the trigger under her finger. She breathed slowly, deeply, letting her heart rate settle, finding the calm space inside herself where doubt could not reach. When the sun finally rose, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink, she felt something shift inside her. Not confidence exactly, more like acceptance. She could not control what would happen on the mission. She could not control Wade's opinion, or the saboteur's hatred, or the thousand variables that would determine success or failure. She could only control herself, her preparation, her focus, her refusal to quit. Rivers found her there an hour later, still lying behind her rifle, watching the sun climb. "You been here all night?" he asked. Could not sleep. Rivers sat down beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You ready?" "No," Mika said honestly. "But I will be." "Good enough." Rivers pulled out an energy bar and handed it to her. "Eat something. You're going to need your strength." The mission brief was at 1400 hours. The entire team assembled in the operations center, SEALs and Army personnel, crowding into a space designed for half their number. Wade stood at the front with Lieutenant Webb and another SEAL officer, a map of the target area projected on the wall behind them. Mika positioned herself where she could see clearly, Rivers beside her, and tried to ignore the weight of attention that followed her movements. She was the only woman in the room, the smallest person by a significant margin. Everyone knew about Wade's complaint. Everyone knew this mission would determine her future. Wade began the brief without preamble. The target is Khalid Nazari, Taliban commander responsible for 6 attacks on coalition forces in the last 3 months. Intelligence indicates he is currently at this compound. Wade pointed to the map, 30 kilometers northeast of our position. The compound sits on elevated ground with clear fields of fire in all directions. Approach is difficult. Defenses are significant. Timeline is critical. We have a 12-hour window before Nazari moves to a new location. He outlined the plan. SEAL elements would infiltrate from the south, using darkness and terrain to mask their approach. They would hit the compound at 0200, fast and overwhelming. Mika and Rivers would establish overwatch on a ridge 3,000 meters north of the target, providing precision fire support and early warning of enemy reinforcements. 3,000 meters, Wade said, looking directly at Mika for the first time. Maximum effective range for the M2010. Wind will be variable. Terrain will create updrafts and eddies that will affect bullet trajectory. Visibility may be compromised by dust or smoke. This is not a range. This is as hard as it gets. Understood, Mika said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Questions? Wade asked the room. There were technical questions about timing, about communication protocols, about contingencies. Wade answered them all with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Then he looked at Mika again. Corporal Tanaka, if you cannot make a shot because of wind or visibility, I need you to say so immediately. Do not try to be a hero. Wounding a target is worse than no shot at all. Clear? Clear, Chief. The brief concluded. Teams dispersed to final preparations. Mika started to leave, but Wade's voice stopped her. Tanaka, a word. She turned. Wade approached, and for once he looked uncertain, like he was about to say something difficult. I meant what I said in there, he began. If you cannot make the shot, you need to say so. But he paused, seeming to struggle with the next words. I also meant what I said about this being as hard as it gets. If you can do this, if you can perform under these conditions, then I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. And I will say so publicly. And if I cannot, Mika asked, then I was right, and you should never have been here. Wade extended his hand. Either way, we will know soon enough. Mika shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, seeing something in his eyes that might have been respect or might have been pity. She could not tell which, and in 24 hours, it would not matter. The convoy departed at 1800 hours, 6 vehicles rolling through the desert as the sun descended toward the horizon. Mika sat in the back of an armored MRAP, surrounded by equipment and the quiet tension that preceded combat operations. Wade's SEAL team occupied the vehicle ahead, visible through the dust-caked window as dark silhouettes against the dying light. Rivers sat across from her, methodically checking his spotting scope for the 3rd time. He caught her watching and smiled, but did not reach his eyes. Everyone felt it, the weight of what was coming, the understanding that in a few hours the theoretical would become terrifyingly real. The terrain grew rougher as they moved northeast, flat desert giving way to rocky hills and steep-sided wadis. The temperature dropped with the sun, desert heat bleeding away in a cold that made Mika grateful for the layers she wore. Her back ached with every jolt of the vehicle, but she welcomed the pain. It kept her focused, kept her present, kept the spiraling thoughts at bay. They reached the staging area at 2200 hours, a sheltered valley 5 kilometers from the target. The vehicles formed a defensive perimeter while teams prepared for the final movement. Mika and Rivers would hike to the observation post with a foreman security element, establishing position while the SEAL teams moved into assault positions. Wade gathered everyone for final checks. His face was painted now, dark camouflage that made him look inhuman in the moonlight. He moved through the assembled operators with practiced efficiency, confirming equipment, verifying communication systems, asking questions that demonstrated he knew every detail of every role. When he reached Mika, he paused. She had her ruck on, 80 pounds pressing her into the earth, her rifle slung across her chest. She met his gaze steadily. "You good?" Wade asked. "Good," Mika confirmed. "Wind is picking up. Northwest at 15, gusting to 25. Temperature dropping fast, which means density altitude is changing. You will need to adjust calculations accordingly." "I know," Mika said. Wade nodded once, then moved on. It was not encouragement exactly, but it was not dismissal either. It was professional acknowledgement that she knew her job, and for Wade, that might have been progress. The hike to the observation post took 90 minutes. The security team moved with tactical precision, clearing angles, maintaining spacing, communicating through hand signals that had been practiced until they became instinct. Mika focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on managing the pain in her back, on not falling behind. The ridge they needed sat above the valley floor like a broken tooth, all jagged rock and loose scree. The climb was brutal. Mika's thighs burned. Her lungs screamed for air that seemed too thin to satisfy. Twice she slipped, catching herself on sharp rock that sliced through her gloves. Rivers stayed close, ready to help but smart enough not to offer unless she asked. She did not ask. They reached the crest at 0030 hours. The observation post was a natural depression between 2 boulders, offering concealment and clear lines of sight to the target compound. Mika dropped her ruck and immediately began setting up, movements automatic despite exhaustion. Rifle positioned, bipod adjusted, rangefinder ready, spotting scope aligned. Rivers worked beside her in practice synchronization, their partnership evident in the lack of words needed. Within 10 minutes, they were operational. The compound sat 3,050 meters to the south, visible through the scope as a collection of buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Lights burned in several windows. Mika counted 6 sentries on the walls, rotating in predictable patterns. Amateur hour security for a high-value target, which meant either bad training or overconfidence. Overwatch established, Rivers whispered into the radio. "Eyes on target." "Copy, Overwatch." Wade's voice came back, distorted slightly by the encrypted channel. "SEAL elements moving to final positions. Stand by." The wait began. Time moved differently on operations, simultaneously crawling and racing. Seconds stretched into hours. Minutes vanished in heartbeats. Mika lay behind her rifle. I pressed to the scope, watching the compound with the patient intensity that defined her profession. The wind gusted across the ridge, carrying the smell of desert and distance. Mika felt it against her face, analyzed its speed and direction, made mental calculations about how it would affect a bullet traveling 3,000 meters. The scope's reticle danced slightly with each gust. At 0-100 hours, the weather changed. Mika felt it before she saw it, a shift in air pressure that made her ears pop. She looked up from her scope and saw it coming from the northwest, a wall of darkness that blotted out the stars. "Sandstorm," she said quietly. Rivers swung his spotting scope to confirm. "Hell, big one too. All elements." Wade's voice came through the radio, tension evident despite his control. "Be advised, sandstorm approaching from northwest. ETA, 15 minutes. This does not change the timeline. I say again, timeline is unchanged. Nazari moves at 0400. This is our only window." Mika watched the storm advance. It moved like a living thing, roiling and churning. Sand carried on winds that had to be gusting past 40 miles per hour. In 15 minutes, visibility would drop to near zero. In 15 minutes, a 3,000-meter shot would go from extremely difficult to borderline impossible. "Overwatch, can you maintain position in the storm?" Wade asked. "Affirmative," Rivers said, glancing at Mika for confirmation. She nodded. "Can you maintain fire capability?" The question hung in the air. This was it. This was Wade asking if she could do what he believed she could not do. Mika ran the calculations in her mind. 3,000 meters in 40-mile-per-hour winds. Visibility reduced to maybe 500 meters. Sand in the air creating unpredictable eddies and currents. Temperature dropping, which would affect air density and bullet velocity. "Affirmative," Mika said. "I can make the shot." "You sure about that, Corporal?" Wade's voice carried doubt mixed with something that might have been hope. Mika thought about her grandfather, about the 442nd fighting in impossible conditions because impossible was all they were given. She thought about every time someone had told her she could not, about every barrier placed in her path, about every doubt she had overcome. She thought about Connor Matthews bleeding out because someone could not do what the mission required. "I am sure, Chief. Give me a target and I'll put it down." "Copy that," Wade said. SEAL elements continuing to assault positions. Storm hits in 10 mics. The storm arrived with the force of a physical blow. One moment, Mika could see the compound clearly through her scope. The next, the world disappeared into a churning wall of sand and wind. The sound was deafening, a constant roar that made communication nearly impossible even through the radio. Sand found every gap in her clothing, every opening in her gear, stinging exposed skin like tiny needles. Mika pulled her shamak tighter around her face, leaving only her eyes exposed. She pressed closer to the scope, trying to maintain sight of the target through the maelstrom. Visibility dropped to 200 meters, then 100. The compound became a ghost, there and gone as the storm surged and ebbed. "This is insane," Rivers shouted over the wind. Mika did not respond. She was calculating, thinking, feeling the wind the way her grandfather had taught her. This was not random chaos. This was air moving according to physical laws, patterns within the turbulence, order beneath the disorder. She just had to see it. "All elements." Wade's voice fought through the static. "We are in position. Stand by for assault." Mika's world narrowed to the circle of her scope. She caught glimpses of the compound through breaks in the storm. A window, a door, the courtyard where intelligence said Nazari would emerge when the assault began. 3,050 meters away, through wind that wanted to push her bullet into the next province. "Assault in 30 seconds, Wade said. Mika controlled her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Heart rate slowing, muscles relaxing, finding the calm at the center of the chaos. "Assault, assault, assault," Wade called. The compound erupted. Flash bangs detonated, turning night into day for brief instants. Gunfire crackled, the distinctive sound of suppressed weapons mixing with unsuppressed return fire. The battle had begun. Mika watched through her scope, waiting, patient despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. Targets moved through the compound. SEAL elements flowing like water, fast and deadly. Taliban fighters scrambling, trying to mount a defense against an enemy they had not seen coming. Then he appeared, a man in traditional Afghan clothing, running from a main building toward a vehicle in the courtyard. Rivers called at the same instant Mika saw him. Target, center of compound, moving north to vehicle. Range? Mika asked, though she already knew. 3050 meters. Wind? Variable, gusting 40 to 50 from northwest. Rivers paused. Mika, this shot is impossible. Nothing is impossible, Mika said. She had waited her whole life for this moment. Everything she had endured, every doubt she had faced, every person who had told her she could not. It all came down to this. One shot, one moment, one chance to prove that size did not determine capability, that determination could overcome limitation, that she belonged. Taking the shot, Mika said. She felt the wind, felt its rhythm and pattern, felt where it would push and where it would pull. She adjusted her aim, not with calculation, but with instinct, with the knowledge that lived in her bones and blood and muscle memory. The target was moving. The wind was gusting. The sand was obscuring. None of it mattered. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle punched into Mika's shoulder with familiar force. The muzzle flash was lost instantly in the sandstorm, swallowed by the churning darkness. The sound of the shot was torn away by wind that screamed across the ridge like something alive and angry. For 3 seconds, the bullet flew through conditions that should have made accuracy impossible, traveling through shifting air currents and sand-laden wind toward a target 3,050 meters away. Mika did not breathe, did not move, did not blink. Through her scope, she watched the target stumble, watched him fall forward onto the courtyard stones, watched him lie still while chaos erupted around him. The world seemed to stop, suspended in that moment between action and consequence. Impact, Rivers said, his voice tight with disbelief. Target down. Confirmed target down. The radio erupted with voices. Wade's team converging on the fallen man, confirming identity, securing the area. Through the breaks in the storm, Mika caught glimpses of movement, of SEALs working with practiced efficiency, of a mission succeeding despite conditions designed to ensure failure. Overwatch, Wade's voice cut through the chatter. Confirm that was your shot. Confirmed, Mika said. 3050 meters, wind gusting 40 plus, visibility near zero. Target neutralized. There was a pause. Then Wade said something Mika had never expected to hear. Outstanding shot, Corporal. Absolutely outstanding. Mika felt something release in her chest, some tension she had been carrying for so long that its absence felt almost painful. She had done it. She had made the impossible shot. She had proven Wade wrong and herself right. But the mission was not over. Be advised, Rivers called into the radio. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. Estimate 4 technicals, armed with heavy weapons. ETA to compound 3 minutes. Copy that, Wade responded. SEAL elements extracting with target. Overwatch, can you engage the vehicles? Mika was already acquiring targets. Through the storm, she could barely make out the approaching vehicles, their headlights cutting through the sand like dim stars. They were moving fast, bouncing over rough terrain, filled with fighters responding to the assault. Range to lead vehicle, Mika said. 2,200 meters and closing, Rivers called. Wind still gusting 40 plus. Sand density increasing. These were not stationary targets. These were vehicles moving at speed over uneven ground. This was not one impossible shot. This was asking for multiple miracles. I can slow them down, Mika said. Give the team time to extract. Negative overwatch, Wade said. Too dangerous. We will break contact and evade. Chief, they will be on you in 2 minutes. You need time. Let me buy it for you. Another pause. Mika could almost hear Wade's internal struggle, his instinct to protect warring with tactical necessity. Finally, he said, You have 2 minutes, Corporal. Make them count. Mika tracked the lead vehicle. It was a Toyota Technical, a mounted machine gun visible in the truck bed. 3 fighters inside, maybe more in the back. The vehicle bounced and weaved, an incredibly difficult target made nearly impossible by the storm. She breathed, felt the wind, calculated lead and drop and drift. Fired. The round took 4 seconds to arrive. It punched through the windshield of the lead technical, and the vehicle swerved violently, careening off the road and rolling twice before coming to rest on its side. Lead vehicle disabled, Rivers called. Second vehicle braking left. Mika was already tracking it. The driver was smart, weaving to make targeting harder. She led the vehicle, feeling where it would be when the bullet arrived, accounting for every variable that mattered and ignoring the ones that did not. Fired. The shot hit the engine block. The technical lurched to a stop, smoke pouring from under the hood. 2 down, Rivers said. Third and fourth vehicles splitting up. Range 1,800 meters. The remaining vehicles had learned. They were no longer driving in formation. They were spreading out, making themselves harder targets, trying to flank the compound from multiple directions. Mika tracked the third vehicle, a larger truck with what looked like a recoilless rifle mounted in the bed. That one is a problem, Rivers said. If they get that weapon into range of the extraction point, it is over. Mika adjusted her aim. The truck was driving erratically, the driver clearly aware they were being engaged. She watched its pattern, found the rhythm in the chaos, predicted where it would be. Fired. The round hit the driver. The truck veered wildly and crashed into a boulder, the momentum throwing fighters from the bed like rag dolls. 3 down, Rivers said. Fourth vehicle turning back. He is running. Let him run, Mika said. She was shaking now, adrenaline and exertion catching up to her. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Her back was on fire. Her hands were steady, but the rest of her felt like it might come apart at any second. All SEAL elements clear of compound, Wade called. Overwatch, collapse to extraction point. Outstanding work. Mika and Rivers broke down their position with practice speed, packing equipment, securing sensitive items, preparing for the movement back to the vehicles. The sandstorm was beginning to ease slightly, visibility creeping back up toward acceptable. The security team materialized from the darkness, ready to escort them back. The hike down was harder than the hike up. Exhaustion made every step feel like moving through deep water. Mika's legs trembled. Her back sent shooting pains down her spine with each jarring impact. She focused on Rivers's back, on following his footsteps, on not falling. They reached the valley floor as the first hints of dawn were painting the eastern sky. The vehicles sat in defensive positions, engines running, teams ready for immediate departure. Mika saw Wade standing near the lead vehicle, still in full combat gear, face paint streaked with sweat and sand. He watched her approach, his expression unreadable. Mika stopped in front of him, suddenly aware of how small she was, how exhausted she looked, how everything she had just accomplished could still be dismissed if Wade chose to see it that way. For shots, Wade said quietly. 4 hits. 3,000 meters plus in a sandstorm. He shook his head slowly. I have been doing this for 15 years, and I could not have made those shots. Nobody could have made those shots. I got lucky, Mika said, deflecting the praise automatically. No. Wade's voice was firm. Luck is making one impossible shot. For impossible shots is skill. He extended his hand. I was wrong, Corporal Tanaka. Completely, thoroughly, embarrassingly wrong. You're not a liability. You are an asset, and I owe you an apology. Mika shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, but also something else. Respect. Genuine, earned respect. Apology accepted. Chief. Wade released her hand and raised his voice so the assembled teams could hear. Listen up. I want everyone here to know that Corporal Tanaka just executed the finest sniper work I have ever witnessed. For confirmed kills at extreme range in the worst conditions I have seen. She bought us the time we needed to extract safely. If anyone has doubts about female snipers in combat roles, I am here to tell you those doubts are unfounded. This soldier is a warrior, full stop. The teams responded with nods and murmurs of agreement. Mika felt heat rise in her cheeks, uncomfortable with the attention, but also feeling something shift fundamentally in how these men looked at her. Not as a curiosity, not as a problem, as an equal. The convoy began loading for the return trip. Rivers appeared at Mika's elbow, grinning like he had won the lottery. "You know you're going to have to teach a class on this when we get back," he said. "Nobody is going to believe it happened otherwise." "I do not even believe it happened," Mika admitted. "Believe it. You just became a legend." Rivers clapped her on the shoulder. "Also, I'm definitely buying you a beer when we get somewhere that is beer. Maybe several beers. I do not drink. Then I will drink them for you and tell everyone how awesome you are." Mika climbed into the MRAP, her body screaming in protest, and settled onto the hard bench. As the vehicle started moving, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. She closed her eyes and saw the shots replay in her mind. The storm, the wind, the impossible calculations that her body had made without conscious thought. Her grandfather's voice echoing across decades, telling her that size was not weakness, that being underestimated was a weapon. She had proven it tonight, proven it to Wade, proven it to herself, proven it to everyone who had ever doubted that someone her size could do this job. But as the exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, she realized something. She had not done alone. Rivers had spotted for her, trusted her, believed in her when she had doubted herself. Vasquez had fought for her, protected her, given her the chance to prove herself. Even Wade, in his own difficult way, had challenged her to be better than good enough. The convoy rolled through the desert as the sun climbed higher, painting the sand in shades of gold. Mika felt the rhythm of the vehicle lulling her towards sleep, felt the weight of accomplishment settling over her like a blanket. She had made 4 impossible shots in a sandstorm at 3,000 meters. She had saved her team. She had earned her place. And for the first time since arriving at this godforsaken base in the middle of nowhere, Mika Tanaka allowed herself to believe she truly belonged. The convoy arrived back at the base as the morning sun turned the desert into a furnace. Mika climbed out of the MRAP moving like someone 3 times her age, every muscle screaming, her back a knot of pain that made breathing difficult. She had been running on adrenaline for hours, and now that it was draining away, exhaustion hit like a physical force. Rivers steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy. You look like you are about to fall over." "I am about to fall over," Mika admitted. "Medical tent first," Rivers said. "Get that back checked out. I saw you wincing on the ride back." "It is fine." "It is not fine. You just pulled off a miracle. Do not ruin it by collapsing from an injury you were too stubborn to treat." Rivers steered her toward the medical facility, a prefabricated structure that smelled like antiseptic and bad decisions. "Doc Martinez will take care of you." Inside the tent, a Navy corpsman with kind eyes and efficient hands examined Mika's back. She stripped off her body armor and uniform top, feeling exposed and vulnerable in just her sports bra and pants. The corpsman's expression grew concerned as he palpated her lower spine. "How long have you been dealing with this?" he asked. "Since basic training," Mika said. "The equipment does not fit right. Straps hit wrong. Weight distributes wrong. It has been manageable." "Manageable," the corpsman repeated. "You have significant muscle inflammation and what feels like the beginning of a stress fracture in your L4 vertebra. This is not manageable. This is a medical discharge waiting to happen." The words hit harder than the pain. Medical discharge. End a career. Everything she had just proven rendered meaningless because her body could not handle equipment designed for someone else. "Can you fix it?" Mika asked quietly. "I can treat the inflammation. I can prescribe pain management. But the underlying problem is structural." The corpsman sat back. "You are carrying too much weight for your frame, using equipment that was not designed for your body type. Long term, this will destroy your spine. You need properly fitted gear, and you need to reduce load bearing." "I cannot reduce my load. I carry what the mission requires." "Then the mission is going to cripple you." The corpsman's voice was gentle but firm. "Listen, you are one of the toughest soldiers I've seen come through here. What you did last night was extraordinary. But tough does not mean indestructible. If you keep pushing like this, in 6 months you will not be able to walk without pain. In a year, maybe not at all." Mika stared at the tent wall, processing this new reality. She had proven she could do the job. She had earned respect. She had overcome every obstacle placed in her path, and now her own body was becoming the final barrier. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "Medical leave, Prope diagnosis, custom-fitted equipment, physical therapy." The corpseman handed her a bottle of prescription anti-inflammatories. "And rest. Actual rest. Not the kind where you keep pushing through because you think you have to prove something." "I do have to prove something," Mika said. "No." The corpseman met her eyes. "You already proved it. The question now is whether you are smart enough to take care of yourself, so you can keep doing what you are clearly exceptional at." Mika dressed slowly, each movement calculated to minimize pain. When she emerged from the medical tent, Wade was waiting outside, leaning against a Hesco barrier with his arms crossed. He had cleaned up, the face paint gone, but he still looked exhausted. "Doc, have you bad news?" he asked. "Depends on your definition of bad." Mika considered lying, then decided Wade had earned honesty. "My back is compromised. Inflammation, possible stress fracture. He says if I keep pushing the way I have been, I will cripple myself." Wade's expression hardened. "How long have you known that was this bad?" "About 10 minutes. That hurt." "Since basic training. And you have been carrying 80-pound rucks and absorbing rifle recoil this entire time." "It is part of the job." Wade pushed off from the barrier. "No, destroying yourself is not part of the job. Adapting the job to your capabilities is." He started walking, gesturing for Mika to follow. "Come with me." They walked across the base to the equipment depot, a large tent filled with gear in various states of readiness. Wade spoke to the supply sergeant, a grizzled staff sergeant who looked like he had been issued with the original base infrastructure. They disappeared into the back while Mika waited, confused and exhausted. They returned carrying a different pack, smaller and more streamlined than standard issue. Wade set it down in front of Mika. "This is a custom ruck used by some special operations units," Wade said. "Designed for smaller frames. Better weight distribution, adjustable straps that actually adjust to your size. It will carry 40 pounds comfortably instead of 80 pounds painfully." "I need to carry 80 pounds, Mika protested. "No, you need to carry what is mission essential. The rest is just us following arbitrary standards that were designed for average male soldiers." Wade pulled out a tablet and opened a spreadsheet. "Let's look at your load list. Water, 12 pounds. Can you use a hydration system instead of canteen? Say 4 pounds. Ammunition, 20 pounds. Do you really need 200 rounds for a precision rifle? You're not providing suppressive fire. 100 rounds saves 10 pounds. We can do this for every item." "You're trying to make accommodations for me," Mika said. "Special treatment. I am trying to prevent an exceptional soldier from destroying her spine because we are too stupid to realize one size does not fit all." Wade's voice was sharp. "You prove you can do the job. You proved it better than most. Now, let us make sure you can keep doing it for the next 20 years instead of the next 6 months." Mika looked at the ruck, at Wade's face, at this unexpected help from a man who weeks ago had wanted her removed from service entirely. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I was wrong about you, and I'm trying to be right about this." Wade set the tablet down. "Also because I talked to Doc Martinez, and he told me about your back. And I realized that you have been operating in pain this entire time, carrying loads that were destroying you, and you never complained once. That is not weakness, Tanaka. That is the kind of stupid courage that gets people killed. So I'm going to help you be smart and courageous instead." Over the next hour, Wade and the supply sergeant helped Mika reconfigure her entire loadout. Lighter pack, streamlined equipment, everything sized to her frame. When they finished, her total load was 55 pounds instead of 80, and the weight distributed in ways that did not make her spine scream in protest. "Try it on," Wade said. Mika shouldered the pack and felt the difference immediately. It still hurt, but the pain was manageable instead of debilitating. She could move without feeling like her vertebrae were grinding together. "Better?" Wade asked. "Much better," Mika admitted. "Good. Now promise me something." Wade's expression was serious. "Promise me you will take care of yourself. You will do the physical therapy. You will use this equipment. You will not try to prove you are as strong as the men because you are not, and you do not need to be. You are better than most of them at what you do, even if you're doing it differently. I promise, Mika said. They walked back toward the operations center together, moving slowly because Mika was still exhausted and Wade seemed in no hurry. The base was coming alive with morning activity, soldiers moving through their routines, the machinery of military life grinding on regardless of individual dramas. Captain Vasquez found them near the headquarters building. She looked between Mika and Wade, clearly trying to figure out why they were walking together instead of maintaining the hostile distance that had characterized their relationship for weeks. Corporal Tanaka, Vasquez said, "I need to see you in my office. Chief Harrington, you should join us." They followed Vasquez inside. Her office felt smaller with 3 people in it, the air thick with anticipation. Vasquez sat behind her desk and pulled out an official-looking folder. First, the mission was a complete success. High-value target neutralized, 0 friendly casualties, extraction clean. Command is very pleased. She looked at Mika. Second, your performance has been noted at levels well above my authority. I have been instructed to inform you that you are being awarded the Bronze Star with V device for your actions during the operation. Mika felt her breath catch. The Bronze Star. The same medal her grandfather had earned. The same medal Wade wore 3 of. Additionally, Vasquez continued, JSOC has requested you for a special assignment. They are building a specialized sniper unit, and they want you as one of the founding members. It would mean transfer, additional training, and working exclusively with Special Operations Forces. Mika looked at Wade, who was smiling slightly, like he knew something she did not. I recommended you for it, Wade said. Told them you were the best sniper I had ever worked with, and that they would be idiots not to bring you on board. You recommended me. I told you I was wrong about you. I'm trying to make up for lost time. Wade's expression turned serious. This is a good opportunity, Tanaka. Working with people who will value what you can do instead of focusing on what you cannot. You should take it. Can I think about it? Mika asked Vasquez. You have 48 hours, Vasquez said. Then I need an answer. Mika left the office in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities. Bronze Star, special assignment, recognition at the highest levels. Everything she had worked for, offered to her because she had proven herself in the only way that mattered. Rivers found her sitting alone near the motor pool, staring at nothing. Heard about the Bronze Star, he said, sitting beside her. Also heard about JSOC. You gonna take it? I do not know, Mika said honestly. Part of me wants to, but part of me thinks this is all happening too fast. A week ago, Wade wanted me gone. Now he is recommending me for special assignments. People can change their minds when presented with overwhelming evidence, Rivers said. You provided overwhelming evidence. He smiled. Also, you earned this. All of it. Do not let imposter syndrome talk you out of what you deserve. The 48 hours passed in a blur of recovery and reflection. Mika spent the time following the corpsman's orders, resting her back, taking anti-inflammatories, using the new equipment Wade had helped her acquire. The difference was remarkable. The constant grinding pain reduced to a manageable ache. Her mobility improved. For the first time in years, she could move without feeling like her spine might snap. She also spent time thinking about the offer. JSOC, Special Operations, working with the best of the best on missions that mattered. It was everything she had wanted when she joined the Army, everything she had worked toward through years of doubt and discrimination and proving herself over and over. But it also meant leaving Rivers, leaving the unit she had finally earned acceptance in, starting over in a new environment where she would once again be the outsider, the anomaly, the one who did not fit. On the second morning, she found Wade at the range, running drills with his SEAL team. He saw her approach and called a break, walking over with the easy confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. You here to give me your answer? Wade asked. I am here to ask you a question first, Mika said. Why did you really recommend me for JSOC? Is it because you think I am good, or because you want me out of your unit? Wade's expression hardened, then softened into something that looked like regret. Fair question. Honest answer. Both initially. When I first wrote the recommendation, part of me thought it would solve a problem. Get you somewhere else. Make you someone else's responsibility. But then I kept writing, and I realized I was not describing a problem. I was describing an asset. By the time I finished, I genuinely believed JSOC needed you. And now? Now I think you should go because you deserve to work with people who will appreciate you from day one instead of making you earn basic respect. Wade looked back at his team. I made your life harder than it needed to be. I questioned you, opposed you, made you prove yourself 10 times over for what I would have given a male soldier automatically. You should not have to keep fighting that battle. What if I want to stay? Wade raised an eyebrow. Why would you want to stay? Because I finally belong here. Because Rivers is the best spotter I have ever worked with. Because Captain Vasquez fought for me when no one else would. Mika, bullshit. Because you changed your mind, and that matters. If I leave now, I am just running towards something better instead of proving that I can make things better where I am. You already proved that, Wade said quietly. You do not owe this unit anything else. Maybe not, but maybe I owe it to the next woman who tries to do what I did. Maybe if I stay and succeed, it makes it easier for her. Maybe that matters more than taking the prestigious assignment. Wade studied her for a long moment. You're a better person than I am, Tanaka. I would take the JSOC offer in a heartbeat and never look back. You already have 3 bronze stars, Mika pointed out. You do not need to prove anything anymore. Neither do you. That is what I'm trying to tell you. Wade's voice was earnest. You made 4 impossible shots in a sandstorm. You saved the mission and probably saved lives. You have nothing left to prove to anyone, including yourself. Mika thought about her grandfather, about the 442nd fighting not just to win battles, but to prove that Japanese Americans deserve to be treated as equals. They could have accepted lesser positions, could have avoided combat, could have taken the easier path. But they chose to fight precisely because it was hard, because their sacrifice would make things better for those who came after. I'm staying, Mika said. At least for now. This deployment, see how things go. If JSOC still wants me in 6 months, I will reconsider. Wade nodded slowly. Your choice. But for what it is worth, I am glad you are staying. We could use someone who makes the rest of us look bad by comparison. That almost sounded like a compliment, Chief. It was a compliment, Corporal. Get used to them. You're going to be hearing a lot more now that I am not being an idiot about your capabilities. Mika reported her decision to Captain Vasquez that afternoon. Vasquez listened without interruption, her expression neutral, then leaned back in her chair. You're sure about this? Vasquez asked. JSOC does not make offers like this often. Turning it down might mean it never comes again. I understand, ma'am. But right now, this is where I need to be. Vasquez smiled, something rare and genuine. Good. Because honestly, I did not want to lose you. You're the kind of soldier who makes commanders look good by association. She pulled out another folder. Since you are staying, you should know that word about your performance is spreading. I have received 3 requests from other units asking to borrow you for operations. You are in demand. What did you tell them? That they can get in line. You are my sniper for the duration of this deployment. After that, we will see. Vasquez closed the folder. Also, your Bronze Star ceremony is scheduled for next week. Dress uniform. Try to look less terrified than you do right now. I will do my best, ma'am. The week that followed felt surreal. Soldiers who had barely acknowledged Mika before now went out of their way to speak to her. NCOs asked her opinions on tactics. Officers invited her to planning sessions. The transformation was complete and total, and while part of Mika appreciated the respect, another part wondered why it had taken 4 impossible shots to earn what should have been given based on her qualifications alone. Rivers noticed her ambivalence. You are overthinking this, he said one evening as they cleaned weapons together. Just accept that people respect you now and move on. It should not have taken a miracle for them to respect me, Mika said. I was qualified before the mission. My record was solid, but nobody cared until I did something they could not ignore. Welcome to being a minority in any institution, Rivers said. You have to be twice as good to get half the credit. It is not fair, it is not right, but it is reality. The question is whether you use that reality as an excuse to be bitter or as motivation to change things. How do I change things? By being visible, by succeeding, by making it impossible for them to say it cannot be done. Rivers set down the rifle he was cleaning. Every barrier you break makes it easier for the next person. Every impossible shot you make expands what people think is possible. That is how change happens. Not through policy, through proof. The Bronze Star ceremony took place on a clear morning with the entire base in attendance. Mika stood at attention in her dress uniform, feeling exposed and uncomfortable with the attention. The medal itself was beautiful, a bronze star suspended from a red, white, and blue ribbon. The same medal her grandfather had earned 70 years earlier fighting a different war in a different time. The commanding officer read the citation. For exceptionally valorous achievement in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Corporal Tanaka demonstrated extraordinary courage and skill, engaging enemy forces at extreme range under the most adverse conditions imaginable. Her actions directly contributed to mission success and saved friendly lives. Her performance reflects great credit upon herself and upholds the highest traditions of military service. The medal was pinned to her chest. Soldiers applauded. Mika stood rigid, fighting the urge to cry, thinking about her grandfather who had never talked about his own medal, who had carried his valor quietly and without fanfare. After the ceremony, Wade approached. He was in his dress uniform as well, his own medals gleaming on his chest. He extended his hand. "Congratulations, Corporal. You earned it." "Thank you, Chief." Mika shook his hand. "And thank you for everything else. The equipment help, the recommendation, changing your mind." "I should be thanking you," Wade said. "You show me I was wrong about something I thought I was right about for years. That is a gift, even if it did not feel like one at the time." He paused. "For what it is worth, Connor would have liked you. He always said the best operators were the ones who refused to accept limitations." "I wish I could have met him," Mika said. "He would have told you that you were too small to be a sniper, then asked you to teach him your wind-reading technique." Wade smiled, something sad and genuine. He was stubborn like that. The reception after the ceremony was awkward in the way military social events always were. Soldiers standing in clusters, trying to make small talk while drinking near beer and eating cookies that tasted like cardboard. Mika found herself surrounded by people congratulating her, asking about the shots, wanting details. She answered their questions politely, modestly, deflecting praise when possible. But inside, she felt something settling, something fundamental shifting into place. She had proven herself. She had earned her medal. She had changed Wade's mind and earned her unit's respect. But more importantly, she had proven something to herself. That size did not determine capability. That being underestimated was not the same as being incapable. That the barriers placed in her path were not insurmountable, just difficult. And difficult was something Mika Tanaka had been dealing with her entire life. That evening, alone in her tent, she pulled out her grandfather's photograph. She looked at his face, at the quiet strength in his eyes, at the rifle he held with such casual competence. She thought about the 442nd, about soldiers fighting not just enemies, but prejudice, about men proving through blood and sacrifice that they deserve to be treated as equals. "I did it, Grandpa," she whispered to the photograph. "I made the impossible shot. I proved I belong." And somewhere in her memory, she heard his voice responding the way he had when she was 12 years old and first learning to shoot. "I always knew you would, Mika. You were built for this." 3 weeks after the Bronze Star ceremony, Mika found herself back on the range with a different kind of audience. 6 female soldiers from various units on base sat in a semicircle behind her, watching as she demonstrated proper prone positioning for long-range shooting. This was Captain Vasquez's idea, informal mentoring program for women in combat roles who wanted to learn from someone who had broken through barriers they were still facing. "The key is finding stability without forcing it," Mika explained, adjusting her position behind the rifle. "Your body should support the weapon naturally. If you're fighting your position, you're fighting your shot." One of the soldiers, a young specialist named Chun, raised her hand tentatively. "How do you deal with equipment that does not fit? My body armor rides up when I go prone. Makes it hard to get a good cheek weld. You modify what you can and adapt to what you cannot." Mika sat up and gestured Chun forward. "Show me your setup." For the next hour, Mika worked with each soldier individually, addressing their specific challenges, sharing techniques she had developed through years of making do with equipment designed for different bodies. It felt strange being the expert, being the one with answers instead of questions. But it also felt right, like she was paying forward the help Rivers and Vasquez had given her. After the session ended and the soldiers dispersed, Wade appeared from where he had been observing at a distance. He walked over with his characteristic confidence, but there was something different in his expression. Approval, maybe, or pride. That was good work, he said. Those soldiers needed to see that someone like them could succeed. I'm not sure I qualify as a role model yet, Mika said. I have only been doing this successfully for 3 weeks. You made 4 impossible shots in a sandstorm, earned a Bronze Star, and turned down JSOC to stay with your unit. Wade smiled. You are exactly the kind of role model they need. Someone who proved it could be done despite everyone saying it could not. Speaking of impossible shots, Rivers joined them, carrying equipment cases. We have a request from 3rd Battalion. They want you to consult on a mission they are planning. High-value target, long-range engagement, difficult conditions. They want my input. Mika was genuinely surprised. They want the best, Rivers corrected. Turns out that is you. Wade here has been telling anyone who will listen that you are the finest precision shooter he has worked with. Wade shrugged. I am just stating facts. Also trying to make up for the months I spent being wrong by being aggressively right now. The consultation turned into a full mission planning session. 3rd Battalion was targeting a Taliban logistics coordinator operating from a compound in the mountains. The shot would be from an elevated position across a valley, approximately 2,800 meters, with uncertain wind conditions due to the terrain. Mika studied the maps and satellite imagery, visualizing the geography, thinking through the variables. The elevation difference would affect bullet trajectory. The valley would create unpredictable wind currents. The time of day would matter for temperature and air density. You need a position here, Mika said, pointing to a ridge on the map. Not here where you initially planned. The valley creates a Venturi effect that will push your bullet left. From this position, you will have cleaner airflow and better observation of the target area. The 3rd Battalion commander, a major with 20 years of experience, studied the map. That position is more exposed, harder to reach. It is also the position that gives you the shot, Mika said. You asked for my recommendation. That is it. The major looked at Wade, who nodded. She's right. I have seen a red terrain that would fool most spotters. If she says that is the position, that is the position. The major turned back to Mika. Would you be willing to accompany my sniper team? Provide guidance during the actual operation? Mika glanced at Wade and Vasquez, who had joined the meeting. They both nodded approval. If Captain Vasquez authorizes it, yes. Authorized, Vasquez said. Make us look good, Corporal. The operation took place 4 days later. Mika found herself on another ridge in another mountain range, this time as an advisor rather than the primary shooter. The 3rd Battalion sniper, a sergeant named Morrison, was competent and professional, but he lacked experience with extreme range shooting under difficult conditions. Mika lay beside him, helping him read the wind, guiding his calculations, sharing the instincts she had developed through thousands of hours behind a scope. Morrison listened carefully, asking intelligent questions, treating her expertise with the respect it deserved. Wind is shifting, Mika said quietly. Coming from a northeast now, about 12 miles per hour. You need to adjust your hold. Morrison made the adjustment. Target is mobile. I have maybe 30 seconds before he enters the building. Then take your time for 29 seconds and send it on 30. Morrison controlled his breathing. Mika watched through her spotting scope, seeing what he saw, feeling the wind the way her grandfather had taught her. The moment arrived. Morrison fired. The bullet flew across the valley, covering 2,800 meters in just over 3 seconds. It struck the target's center mass. The man dropped instantly. Impact, Mika confirmed. Target down. Perfect shot. Morrison let out a breath he had been holding. Holy hell, that actually worked. You did the work, Mika said. I just helped you read the conditions. That shot was all yours. The extraction was clean. No contact. No complications. On the helicopter ride back to base, Morrison sat beside Mika, still processing what had happened. "I have been trying to make shots like that for 2 years," he said over the noise of the rotors. "Never could figure out the wind reading in mountain terrain. You made it look simple." "It is not simple," Mika said. "It is just practice and pattern recognition. You see enough conditions, you start to feel how air moves. Give it time." "Will you teach me?" Morrison asked. "I mean, if you have time. I know you are busy, but I would pay for that kind of instruction if I could." "You do not need to pay me," Mika said. "Just pass it on to the next person who needs help. That is how this works." Back at base, word of the successful operation spread quickly. Mika found herself being approached by other snipers, other units, people wanting advice or training or just to understand how she did what she did. It was overwhelming and humbling and strange. "You are becoming famous," Rivers observed one evening as they sat outside their tent, watching the sun set over the desert. "The best precision shooter in theater. Maybe in the whole army." "That feels like an exaggeration," Mika said. "It is not." Rivers pulled out his phone and showed her an article from a military news website. It featured a photo of her receiving the Bronze Star, along with a detailed account of her performance during the Nazari operation. The headline read, "4'9" Corporal makes 4 impossible shots, redefines what small stature soldiers can achieve." "Oh no," Mika said. "This is going to make everything weird. This is going to make everything better," Rivers corrected. "Every woman in the military who has been told she is too small or too weak now has proof that those limitations are nonsense. Every commander who thinks women cannot handle combat roles now has to reconsider. You did not just prove yourself, Mika. You changed the conversation. I just did my job." "No, you did your job exceptionally well despite every obstacle placed in your way, and now people are paying attention." Rivers put his phone away. "That matters. That changes things." That night, Mika received an email from a soldier she had never met. A woman at Fort Benning who had read the article and wanted to share that she had been considering leaving the Army because she felt like she would never be taken seriously in her combat MLS. But seeing Mika's story had changed her mind. She was going to stay. She was going to fight. She was going to prove herself the way Mika had. The email ended with a simple line. "Thank you for showing us it can be done." Mika read the email 3 times, feeling emotion build in her chest. She thought about all the times she had wanted to quit, all the moments when the pain and doubt and discrimination had felt like too much. She thought about Wade's dismissal, the sabotage, the constant pressure to prove she was worthy of respect that should have been automatic. And she realized that every obstacle, every challenge, every person who had doubted her had been preparation for this moment, for being someone who could inspire others, for being proof that barriers could be broken. She responded to the email with encouragement and advice, then sent similar messages to the other women who had reached out. By the time she finished, it was late and the base was quiet. She stepped outside her tent and looked up at the stars, feeling the desert wind against her face, feeling her grandfather's presence the way she always did when she needed strength. "We did it," she thought. "We proved them wrong." And somewhere in the vast darkness above, she imagined her grandfather smiling, proud of the woman she had become, proud of the barriers she had broken, proud that his lessons had mattered across generations and wars, and all the impossible distances between who they told her to be and who she had chosen to become. The deployment was entering its final month when Captain Vasquez called Mika to her office for what she said was an important conversation. Mika arrived to find not just Vasquez, but Wade and a colonel she had never met. A stern-looking woman with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons that indicated decades of distinguished service. "Corporal Tanaka," Vasquez said, "this is Colonel Patricia Hammond from Army Training and Doctrine Command. She has traveled here specifically to speak with you." Mika snapped to attention. "Mung." "At ease, Corporal." Hammond's voice was crisp and authoritative. "Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Mika sat, acutely aware of the weight of attention from 3 superior officers. Hammond opened a folder and studied it for a moment before looking up. "Your performance during this deployment has been exceptional," Hammond said. "Bronze Star with V device. multiple successful operations, documented expertise that has influenced tactical planning across theater. You have also become something of a symbol, whether you intended to or not. I just did my job, ma'am, Mika said. Yes, you keep saying that. Hammond smiled slightly. But your job has had implications beyond your individual performance. The Army is undergoing significant cultural changes regarding women in combat roles. We need success stories. We need proof that integration works. You have provided that proof in ways that are impossible to dismiss. With respect, ma'am, I did not set out to be a symbol. No one ever does. Hammond closed the folder. But here is the reality. The Army wants to create a training program focused on maximizing performance for soldiers who do not fit traditional physical profiles. Smaller frames, different body types, adaptive techniques. We need someone with real-world experience to help design that program. Someone who has not just succeeded despite physical differences, but has developed concrete methods for doing so. You want me to help design training programs? Mika asked. I want you to lead the initiative, Hammond said. It would mean reassignment to Fort Benning after this deployment. It would mean working with Training and Doctrine Command to revolutionize how we approach equipment, tactics, and qualification standards for non-traditional body types. It would mean your expertise would influence the next generation of soldiers. Mika felt the weight of the offer settle over her. This was bigger than JSOC. This was institutional change. This was the opportunity to make sure no one else had to struggle the way she had struggled, to ensure that the lessons she had learned through pain and persistence would benefit thousands of soldiers who came after. What about my sniper career? Mika asked. Would I still operate? You would maintain proficiency and deploy periodically, but your primary focus will be training development. Hammond leaned forward. I'm not going to lie to you, Corporal. This is not the path to becoming the most decorated sniper in Army history. This is the path to changing the institution. The question is which matters more to you. Mika looked at Wade, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He had known this was coming, probably recommended her for it. She looked at Vasquez, who wore an expression of pride, mixed with the sadness of knowing she was about to lose an exceptional soldier. Can I think about it? Mika asked. You have 1 week, Hammond said. After that, I need an answer so we can begin the transition planning. After Hammond left, Mika sat with Wade and Vasquez in the office that had witnessed so many pivotal moments of her deployment. The three of them were quiet for a long moment. You recommended me for this too, Mika said to Wade. It was not a question. Guilty, Wade admitted. Colonel Hammond reached out to me asking about soldiers who had overcome significant obstacles to excel in combat roles. Your name was the first one out of my mouth. Why do you keep trying to get rid of me? Mika asked, but she was smiling. I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to put you where you can have the most impact. Wade's expression was serious. You are an exceptional operator, Tanaka, but you could also be an exceptional leader and innovator. This job would let you help thousands of soldiers instead of supporting dozens of operations. The math is pretty simple. But I love being a sniper, Mika said quietly. I know, Vasquez said, and you are exceptional at it. But Wade is right about the impact. You have the opportunity to ensure that future soldiers do not have to fight the battles you fought just to get a chance to prove themselves. That is worth considering. What would you do? Mika asked Vasquez. I would ask myself what I want my legacy to be, Vasquez said. Do I want to be remembered as an outstanding operator who did her job brilliantly? Or do I want to be remembered as someone who changed the system so that excellence was recognized regardless of physical profile? Both are valid choices. Neither is wrong, but they lead to very different futures. That night, Mika walked the perimeter of the base alone, thinking about futures and legacies and what mattered most. She thought about her grandfather, about the 442nd fighting not just to win battles, but to prove something larger. They had not taken the safe path. They had not chosen individual glory. They had chosen to change how America saw Japanese Americans, and they had paid for that change in blood. She found Rivers at the communications tent, finishing his shift. He took one look at her face and grabbed his jacket. Walk, he offered. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching on gravel, the night air cold and clear. Finally, Rivers spoke. "You were thinking about taking the training job," he said. "How did you know about that?" "Wade told me. Asked my opinion, actually, about whether you were the right person for it." Rivers smiled. "I told him you were the only person for it. But if I take it, we will not work together anymore," Mika said. "You are the best spotter I have ever had. And you're the best sniper I have ever worked with." Rivers stopped walking and turned to face her. "But here's the thing. We have had a good run. We have done exceptional work together. And that work will matter for the missions we supported and the lives we saved. But if you take this job, you will save more lives by preventing soldiers from destroying themselves, trying to use equipment that does not fit. You will enable more success by teaching people that different does not mean less. You will change the institution in ways that last generations. I will miss working with you," Mika said, feeling emotion rise in her throat. "I will miss working with you too, but I will be proud as hell watching you change the Army." Rivers put a hand on her shoulder. "You proved you could do the job. Now go prove they can change the job to fit more people like you." Mika made her decision 3 days later. She informed Colonel Hammond by video call that she would accept the position effective after deployment. Hammond smiled, something warm and genuine, and told her she was making the right choice. The last weeks of deployment passed quickly. Mika continued to work with 3rd Battalion, continued to mentor female soldiers, continued to refine techniques that would eventually become official doctrine. She also spent time with Wade and Rivers, knowing these days of working together as a team were numbered. On their final operation together, a relatively simple Overwatch mission for a convoy, Mika set up her position with Wade and Rivers beside her. The three of them worked with the easy synchronization that came from shared experience and mutual respect. "Remember when you hated me?" Mika asked Wade as they waited for the convoy to pass through their sector. "I never hated you," Wade said. "I was afraid for you. There's a difference. You call me a doll who could not fight." Wade winced. "Yeah, I said that. And I was spectacularly wrong. You are one of the finest warriors I have had the privilege to serve with." He glanced at her. "For what it's worth, I am sorry it took me so long to see it. You came around eventually," Mika said. "That is what matters." The convoy passed through safely. No contact, no drama, just professionals doing their jobs competently and well. As they packed up to return to base, Rivers looked out at the desert landscape one last time. "This is it," he said. "Last time the three of us worked together like this. End of an era," Wade agreed. "Beginning of a new one," Mika corrected. "Everything we learned here, everything we proved, it all moves forward. It does not end. It just evolves." They returned to base as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that made even the desert look beautiful. Mika felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness at leaving this life behind. Excitement about what was coming next. Pride in what they had accomplished together. Gratitude for the people who had challenged her, supported her, and ultimately helped her become who she was meant to be. That evening, the unit held an informal gathering to mark the end of deployment. Soldiers sat in circles, sharing stories, decompressing, preparing mentally for the transition back to normal life. Wade stood and called for attention. "I want to say something," Wade announced. "A few months ago, I made a serious mistake. I judged a soldier based on physical appearance instead of capability. I opposed her assignment. I questioned her qualifications. I made her prove herself 10 times over for respect I should have given automatically." He looked directly at Mika. "That soldier was Corporal Tanaka, and she did not just prove me wrong. She showed me how wrong I was to think that size determines capability, that tradition should override evidence, that my assumptions were more valid than her performance." The gathered soldiers were silent, listening intently. Mika Tanaka is one of the finest snipers I have worked with in 15 years of service. She made shots I could not make under conditions I could not handle. She earned a Bronze Star through valor that I have rarely witnessed. And now she is leaving us to do something even more important than individual operations. She's going to change how the Army trains soldiers who do not fit traditional profiles. She's going to make sure future soldiers do not have to fight the battle she fought. Wade raised his bottle of near beer. To Corporal Tanaka, warrior, teacher, The soldier who proved that a doll can fight better than most of us ever will. The unit responded with cheers and applause. Mika felt tears threaten and fought them back, standing to acknowledge the recognition, feeling the weight of their respect and the responsibility of what came next. The flight home felt surreal. Mika sat in the cargo plane surrounded by soldiers who were heading back to families, to normal lives, to worlds that had continued without them while they were deployed. She held her grandfather's photograph in her hands, the worn edges familiar under her fingers, his face a reminder of where she came from and what she had proven. Rivers sat beside her, his head back, eyes closed but not sleeping. They had said their goodbyes a dozen times already, but somehow it still did not feel like enough. "You're going to do great things at Benning," Rivers said without opening his eyes. "You're going to miss me," Mika said, desperately. Rivers opened his eyes and smiled. "But I'm also going to brag about having worked with you every chance I get. Future spotter generations will be sick of hearing about the time I spotted for Mika Tanaka. You are ridiculous. I am proud. There is a difference." Fort Benning welcomed her with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Within days of arrival, Mika found herself in meetings with Training Command, reviewing curriculum, examining equipment standards, identifying gaps between doctrine and reality. The work was challenging in entirely new ways, requiring her to think systematically instead of tactically, to consider thousands of soldiers instead of individual missions. Colonel Hammond proved to be an exceptional mentor, guiding Mika through the political complexities of institutional change while protecting her from those who resisted evolution. Together, they began building a program that would revolutionize how the Army approached physical diversity in combat roles. The first pilot course launched 3 months after Mika arrived. 20 soldiers, male and female, all smaller than traditional standards. All told, at some point, they were not built for combat roles. Mika stood before them on the first day of training, seeing her own doubts reflected in their faces. "I am Corporal Mika Tanaka," she began. "I am 4 feet 9 inches tall. I weigh 98 pounds. I have been told I am too small to be a soldier, too weak to carry my own weight, too fragile for combat. I have been called a doll who cannot fight. I have been sabotaged, dismissed, and opposed by people who thought my size disqualified me from service." The soldiers watched her intently, some nodding in recognition of shared experiences. "I'm also a Bronze Star recipient with AV device for valor. I made 4 confirmed kills at 3,000 meters in a sandstorm. I have deployed twice, completed 8 combat operations, and trained operators across multiple units." Mika paused, letting that sink in. "Your size does not determine your capability. It determines your approach. And that is what we are going to learn here. Not how to be as strong as bigger soldiers, but how to be effective using the strengths your body type provides." Over the following weeks, Mika taught them everything she had learned through pain and persistence. Proper equipment fitting, load distribution techniques, modified tactical movement, precision over power, efficiency over brute force. She brought in Rivers via video call to teach spotting techniques. She brought in the supply sergeant from Afghanistan to demonstrate custom equipment solutions. She even brought in Wade, who spoke candidly about his own mistakes and what he had learned from being proven wrong. The soldiers responded with hunger for knowledge and appreciation for being taught by someone who understood their challenges firsthand. They pushed themselves hard, supported each other, and proved that excellence came in many sizes. 6 months into her new role, Mika received a package from Afghanistan. Inside was a handwritten letter from Sergeant Morrison, the sniper she had advised during her deployment. He wrote that he had successfully made a shot at 2,900 meters using the techniques she had taught him. He had recommended 3 soldiers from his unit for the new training program at Benning. He thanked her for showing him that expertise was not about matching someone else's approach, but about developing your own based on your unique capabilities. Also enclosed was a photograph. It showed Morrison with his team, all of them holding a banner that read, "Taught by the best. Thanks, Corporal Tanaka." Mika put the photograph on her desk next to her grandfather's, two images separated by 70 years but connected by the same truth. That courage came in all sizes. That determination mattered more than physical advantage. That barriers existed to be broken. A year after returning from deployment, Mika was promoted to sergeant. The ceremony was small, just Colonel Hammond and a few colleagues from the training command. But Wade flew in from Virginia Beach, where he was stationed, and Rivers drove down from Fort Bragg, both of them insisting they would not miss it. After the ceremony, the three of them sat outside on a bench overlooking the training grounds where Mika spent her days teaching the next generation. "You know the program is being expanded," Wade said. "Army-wide implementation starting next year. Every basic training location will have adaptive training modules based on your curriculum." "That is terrifying," Mika said. "That is impact," Wade corrected. "You changed the institution." "How many people can say that?" "I just wanted to prove I could do the job," Mika said. "And you did. Then you went further and made it so others could do it too, without fighting through everything you fought through." Rivers smiled. "That is called leadership, Sergeant Tanaka." "The title still sounds weird," Mika admitted. "You will get used to it," Wade said. "Just like I got used to being wrong about you." "Are you ever going to let that go?" Mika asked. "Never. It is the best mistake I ever made because it taught me the most important lesson of my career." Wade's expression turned serious. "That assumptions are dangerous. That tradition is not always right. That the best warriors are not always the ones who look like warriors." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching soldiers train in the distance, watching the sun descend toward the horizon, watching the world continue its perpetual motion. Mika thought about the journey that had brought her here. The doubt, the pain, the sabotage, the impossible shots, the transformation of enemies into allies, the decision to choose impact over individual achievement. Every step had felt uncertain at the time, but looking back, it all formed a path that led exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed with a message. Another email from a soldier inspired by her story. Another woman deciding to stay in the Army because she saw that success was possible. Another person who needed to know that their size did not determine their worth. Mika read the email and felt the familiar weight of responsibility mixed with pride. This was her mission now, not engaging targets at extreme range, but expanding possibility for those who came after. Not proving she belonged, but proving that belonging was not defined by traditional standards. "I need to ask you something," Mika said to Wade and Rivers. "If you could go back to the beginning, knowing everything that would happen, would you change anything?" "Not a thing," Rivers said immediately. "Best professional experience of my career." Wade thought about it longer. "I would change how I treated you initially. I would listen instead of assume. I would give you the respect you deserve from day one." He paused. "But then you would not have had to prove yourself the way you did, and the proof matters. It matters to you. It matters to everyone watching. So maybe the struggle was necessary for the impact." Maybe Mika agreed. Or maybe the struggle was just struggle, and we make meaning from it afterward. Either way, Wade said, "You won. You did not just break barriers, you demolished them. And now you are making sure they stay demolished." The sun touched the horizon, and Mika pulled out her grandfather's photograph one more time. She looked at his face, at the quiet strength she had inherited, at the legacy she was carrying forward in her own way. "Thank you," she thought, "for teaching me to feel the wind, for showing me that size is not destiny, for proving that courage comes in all forms. And thank you," she thought to Wade and Rivers and Vasquez and every person who had challenged her or supported her or made the journey possible, for being part of a story that started with doubt and ended with change. As darkness fell over Fort Benning, Mika stood and stretched, her back no longer screaming in constant pain thanks to properly fitted equipment and ongoing physical therapy. She was healthy. She was respected. She was making a difference that would outlast any individual mission. The three of them walked back toward the main buildings together, three warriors from different backgrounds united by shared experience and mutual respect. Behind them, the range sat quiet in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, it would fill again with soldiers learning to shoot, learning to adapt, learning that excellence was not about fitting a standard, but about exceeding expectations regardless of the challenges. And somewhere in that future, Mika knew another soldier who had been told they were too small or too different would pick up a rifle and discover what she had discovered. That impossible was just another word for difficult. That barriers existed to be overcome. That a doll, given the right training and the right opportunity and the right amount of determination, could fight as well as anyone. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most with you, or share if you have witnessed similar courage in real life. Your favorite moment, your favorite character, or if you've had a similar situation happen to you before, I would love to hear about it.